Hello and welcome back to the Masonic Roundtable, a weekly hangout where Masons from around the world get together to talk about Masonic news and opinions in a friendly and social manner. The thoughts and opinions expressed here are solely the opinions of the participants and do not represent any Grand Lodge statements or positions. Make sure you keep your conversations open for the public and on the level. To interact with us, send questions and comments to our Twitter page at Mason Roundtable or on the Facebook event page. My name is John Ruark, and I am a past master of the Patriot Lodge number 1957 in Fairfax, Virginia, and I'll hand it off to Juan Sepulveda for the next introduction.
Hello, Juan Sepulveda from Orange Blossom Lodge number 80 in Kissimmee, Florida, and the host of the Winding Stairs Freemasonry podcast.
Excellent. Thank you, Juan. Robert Johnson.
Hey guys, Robert Johnson here, Worshipful Master for this year, Waukegan Lodge number 78, Waukegan, Illinois, and the host of the Masonic podcast, Whence Came You?
And you haven't been fired from Lodge yet.
I haven't.
There's still time. Yes. Nick Johnson, how about you?
Nick Johnson, a terrible past master from Corinthian Lodge number 67 in Big Time Farmington. They locked the doors.
Thank you, Nick. And last but not least, Jason Richards.
Last but certainly not least, Jason Richards, Junior Warden of Acacia Lodge, number 16 in good old Clifton, Virginia, and still the Tyler of the Patriot Lodge, number 1957 in Fairfax, Virginia.
The sort of okay, but not quite big time. Fairfax, Virginia. Awesome. All right, so Masonic news has been light this week, which is good because we have a track record of reporting on arsons, so no news is good news. However, I did want to say...
fewer fires breaking out.
Yes. That Masonic Me Monday on Reddit was picking up this week, so good job, guys, for bringing a little humor back into Reddit/r/Freemasonry.
What? There is nothing funny in Freemasonry. You can't have fun.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So that really segues right into the Masonic Monday question.
Traditional observance. I mean...
Oh! MMQOT, Masonic Monday question on Tuesday. Take it away, Nick.
Holy smokes! You're just throwing all kinds of stuff at me today. All right, here we go. You're gonna love this. We had quite a few of our loyal listeners who sent correct answers in, so I'll try and read them as quickly as possible. I'm gonna leave your lodge stuff out of it, and I'll just put that on the Facebook page if I remember. We have Justin Miller, Greg Guffey, Jonathan Primo, Christopher Croteau, Willem Kossen, Blake Leach, Lou Bedford, Will Fowler, Simon Dick, Eric Christensen, Christian Dubs, James Webb, Joey Chandler, Tom McCoy Jr., Jeff Blowmaker, and Michael Laidlaw. So congratulations, guys. The answer to that one was, of course, the indomitable Dixie Dean, who played for Everton. He was initiated into Randall Home Lodge, number 3261 of the English Constitution in 1931. All right, and now for this very, very fun question. Since it was Flag Day on Sunday, I decided I might as well do a Flag Day-centric question. So the question for this week is, this fraternal organization resolved to designate June 14th as Flag Day in 1907. This resolution was made official in 1911 by requiring each of its constituent lodges to observe Flag Day. Which fraternal organization gives Flag Day such prominence? When you have an answer, send it to masonicmonday@gmail.com. Don't forget to include your lodge name, lodge number, and the hashtag #WaveTheFlag. That's right, hashtag #WaveTheFlag. Back to you, John.
The flag or the flag?
The flag.
Flag. Should I say it like Eddie Izzard?
Do you have a flag? Oh, it's the rebels, sir. They brought a flag.
My good God, man! Have you made them tea?
Well, at least it's not comic books tonight. That's good.
Not
That
yet.
wizard's amazing. Anyone who's listening to the show should automatically go out and get Dressed to Kill because it's the best thing ever.
Yeah. Just stop watching now. No, just
No,
kidding.
no. Alrighty. This week's topic, going right into it, thank you, Nick, is religion and Freemasonry. Wow, so.
This is the soonest we've ever gotten to the actual topic.
Yes, and we're done.
Good night, everybody. We love you.
So this will be exciting because there's plenty to talk about for sure. Obviously, we can't fit this all into one show. In fact, we have plans to break it out into some of the specific denominations, history with Freemasonry. But this is kind of an overview, a broad brush of how religion and Freemasonry intersect or not, and basically how it applies to the fraternity and the system that we've established. Now, I'll say my personal experience is when I first joined Freemasonry, I did not know how religious the ritual was. And so a good intro, good teaser into that discussion area, and I'm going to open it up to you guys, is it is said, at least in Virginia ritual, that Freemasonry is not a religion, but it is religious. How would you guys interpret that, and how is that applied in your jurisdiction? Does your jurisdiction have something similar to that, and how do you differentiate religion versus religious? And I'll start with Nick Johnson.
Can I first say I really hate that phrase?
Why do you
with
hate
a
it?
passion of 1,000 suns, because to the layperson there's no real difference, and it's for the casual person who's just interested in whether or not Freemasonry is actually its own piece of cult or piece of the occult. If someone responds with that almost Socratic answer, people are going to be like, yeah, okay, we're done. It doesn't actually impart any knowledge to the person asking the question.
Well, Daniel Tosh had a joke about that where he said, it's always weird those girls that say, I'm not religious, but I'm spiritual. And then he always responds, I'm not honest, but you're interesting. So it's one of those, you're right. I mean, it's such a loaded word, and it's one of those that obviously we aren't, it's hard to explain. I sometimes explain this, the way that we're related to religion is that we are fostering dialogue between the religions. I mean, within our own, Anderson's Constitution came out. The whole point of Masonry, at least according to Dr. Anderson, was to bring those men that are at a perpetual distance into fellowship. And so for me, it's not so much that Masonry is a religious organization. I mean, there are religious aspects to it, and I say that in terms of they've been adopted from different cultures, but and mostly within the Christian context because of where it was developed. But at least in my opinion, Masonry's main duty is to bring men that all believe in a supreme being or a God, or however you're going to define that supreme essence that guides earthly travels and other things like that. It brings men together so that they can come into a room that they would have never entered on their own and just sit down and shake hands and break bread. That's how I've always defined it.
Regardless of their religion, right?
Exactly.
Okay, Juan, how about you? How do you interpret that?
I have heard that expression many times in my local lodges. I can't say that I have come across about it written officially by anybody. I can't say. I know that I have read something saying that it is a spiritual organization. But I think that religion, the word itself, it can be very charged. For some people, it could mean tradition, while to others, it can mean sectarianism or dogma. It can mean a lot of different things. If we were to define religion, here's how I define religion. I think religion is mankind's attempt to understand and explain deity and its relationship to mankind.
Mm.
I think that's my view of what religion is. Now, when people see religion and they define it as dogma, then quickly a shield is going to come up, and they might not be as open to discuss it or have a peaceful discourse about it. So I think that Freemasonry definitely is I don't consider it a religion, but it is steeped in religion. We meet in a temple. We do have a volume of sacred laws. We have prayers that we do together.
Sounds pretty religious to me.
Sounds very religious.
Robert,
I think there's.
Go ahead, Jason.
Go ahead, Robert. Well, I think you have to look at kind of the definitional aspect of religion versus religious. And specifically, I see Freemasonry not as a religion to be celebrated, but a fraternity that celebrates religion and all different religions. So yes, there's an inherently spiritual aspect to it. However, Freemasonry in and of itself is not the end-all, be-all. It doesn't promise salvation, and it doesn't contain religious dogma. But at the same time, if we go on Juan's, on Juan's definition of religion, Freemasonry does provide some tenets or some teachings that relate God, the Creator, to His creation.
So let's define dogma real quick, because it's been used twice already, and we've kind of separated that. And we've used it in the context that Freemasonry does not have a prescribed dogma. Kind of the loose definition of dogma is a set of practices or principles that are, according to one group, found to be true. That if that were to change, then that would break the whole system of truth, right? So that means that these are the spiritual rules that have to be true. You have to follow if to stay within this context. And so what we're saying here is that Masonry, because it's influenced and accepts other religions, does not have a specific set of religious rules. It has lots of other rules. Does not have any specific religious rules that say you must believe in this in order to be a Mason. You must believe in this to follow our degree system, whatever.
You mean you must believe in a supreme being?
Except for that one. There's that. I just broke my own rule. There's really one. No atheist can be a Mason in most of the United States. So,
and that just goes to show how complicated of a topic this is. Because when you have an organization that's steeped in spiritual principles and borrows a lot of imagery from the Bible and other different religious sources, it gets very, very hard to separate the fraternal tenets from some of the religious texts that it draws from the ritual from.
So usually what I say when I definitely explain to someone who's interested in Masonry some of the religious undertones that come with Masonry is that it is not a religion, as I define it as. It will not get you a spiritual pathway to God. That's between you and your Creator. That's between you and your own personal religion. It does reference, again, at least in Virginia and many states in the United States, it does reference Bible verses. It does reference Bible stories, but does not say this is the pathway to heaven, your own personal salvation. So there is none of that in Lodge.
Here's a question for all of you, and I think every Grand Lodge kind of takes a position on belief in a supreme being. At least in my jurisdiction, the petition, and this is kind of the question I was going to ask everybody, is the petition here says that do you have a faith and trust in God? That's essentially what that question is. Now, what do all of your petitions state in terms of that particular question on the petition?
I'm looking it up now.
I know, I just threw that right out at you. I'm like, boo.
Must
But,
must profess belief in the supreme being.
Okay.
That's as far as I can recall from the Virginia petition.
I'll keep looking it up.
Because, in Texas, and I just looked it up just because I remembered it's kind of an interesting thing, they actually say, do you seriously declare upon your honor that you firmly believe in the existence of God, the immortality of the soul, and the divine authenticity of the Holy Scripture? Which is kind of interesting. Each Grand Lodge is taking a different position, so I was just curious what everybody...
So Virginia has a nice little catch-all in here. It's one of the last statements that you sign on your petition to join. It's, I hereby state that I believe and trust in God as the supreme architect and governor of the universe. Blah, blah, blah.
Interesting.
Illinois is just supreme. Do you have a belief in a supreme being?
As in Florida.
So flying spaghetti monster is allowed.
Yes, it is.
That poses an interesting question for deists who believe that God created all things and then just kind of walked away and took a smoke break.
Well, it doesn't,
Because he's not actively governing the universe.
That's not necessarily a deist.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
isn't that pantheist?
So
But
if anybody out there doesn't know what a deist is, loosely defined, I would tell you that it is a belief in God, but we don't believe in revealed religions. Like, we don't think that God would choose to reveal himself to any specific person or persons. All right,
which is blasphemy. I'm just saying. I'm just.
Oh, it's on.
Let's go.
Let's go.
But
Robert
at
Johnson's
least
going to
in
talk
Illinois-
bad about me in the next episode of Whence Came You.
I'm gonna hate you. I'm gonna hate you so bad. No, I'm kidding.
Why
But
you were saying?
in Illinois and Florida is vague enough that if the individual had to believe in God, whether he takes an active role in our daily lives or not, it still doesn't matter. When the question is asked as broadly as, do you believe in a supreme being?
Like, we asked that question, it's up to you. You don't even have to explain it.
Yeah.
So, but I've had guys feel a need to explain to me. They're like, well, to me, God is just the creative force of the universe. Okay, would
Cool.
you be okay with putting your hands on a Bible and just using that as a token for your faith? Yeah, okay, then we have no problem. For me, it's an interesting thing because my religious views being what they are, I find it interesting that we are, as you guys mentioned earlier, spiritual. However, I don't see any religion outside of a scripture reading in lodge ritual. Like, there is no there's no spirituality. There's no, like, I don't see that kind of stuff in today's lodge. Today's lodge, my experience has always been guys getting together for dinner, a lot of swearing, dirty jokes. We go into the lodge, it's open, we take care of what we got to take care of, and there's not like philosophical religious debate going on. So I don't see it being spiritual.
So that's interesting when you look at
religion.
Well, that's kind of interesting when you talk about like the traditional observance movement, who take the time to purify the lodge room by doing circumambulation beforehand, and taking reverence in the ritual as a cleansing ceremony. It's still the same ceremony that the guys who wear bib overalls do, but
Yeah.
they take it more as a spiritual aspect of Masonry rather than just funny
And
words that we say.
I'd love that idea. I wish it were more like that. I wish it were a little bit more deep and spiritual, because a lot of my friends, I live in Illinois, and if in the state of Illinois, above I-80, or if you go below I-80, you're getting into like the Bible Belt, and so there's a lot of contention, and I'll get into it a little bit later about the use of a Bible in the lodge and on the altar and things like that, being what we are supposed to be, a house for all. But yeah.
Well, this is a good segue into my next question for you guys,
Sure.
which is, we're kind of dancing around, the Bible, kind of the Christian flavor. Was Freemasonry Christian? I know Nick knows the answer.
Uh-oh.
Was it founded as a Christian organization?
I'm gonna answer it in a nuanced way.
Remember, this is being recorded, so.
Yes, it was an organization founded within the culture in which it was founded. So, I mean,
It was a product of its times.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, it's one of those that it was.
You should maybe say 1717 Masonry.
Yeah. Yeah. It depends on which. Yeah.
Even back to 1400s. I would even go that far.
Yeah. So by definition, if you go look back, and again that book that I did give back to Jason, the History of Freemasonry and the Concordant Orders, do go into great detail on the old charges that were given before anything was written down in 1717. And in those charges, they had, you had to not only believe in God, but you had to believe in Christ, and you had to follow Christ as a member of Masonry, both operative and then the evolution and speculative Masonry.
And there was just an assumption that you believed in the Trinity, because I mean that's exactly what it was. Is that it was founded within the I don't think it was necessarily founded as a Christian organization. It wasn't somebody came in and said, and now we shall have all of this religious work that we have done. I think it was just founded, just like anything else.
At that time, there was the theocracy, so everything was religious.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, the Regis poem, if you go back to it and you look through it, I mean, that was the 14th century, probably late 14th century, I think. I'm having a tough time remembering, but it's one of those that the mentions of the four crowned ones, the four martyrs, you've got mentions of the Virgin Mary, doing Christ's work, things like that. But I think it was just kind of taken as just an assumption that you're doing these things for that person, for Christ. You're not doing them, because you're trying to push some kind of dogma, because everybody was sharing the same dogma essentially. So I don't think it was necessarily
question then, right? So you're going to have, I don't know, a bazillion and a half people are going to ask questions now about what you would consider Masonic operative lodges from, I don't know, 70 years after Christ is gone. You're going to have questions about people who claim ancient Egyptian origin. You're going to have people who also claim that it's technically not Christian, but Hebrew. So what about that stuff? What would you say?
Well, we were descendant from the Knights Templar.
That goes without saying. I mean, really.
Hashtag born in blood.
I love you, John J. Robinson.
Oh, go ahead, Juan.
Yeah, there's clearly, off the top of our heads, we're not going to be able to recall all the things that are going to prove that this is Egyptian origin. But, based on what we have been reading, we can get a sense that there is, or at least there was a little bit more blunt presence of religion within Freemasonry than what we see today. I am curious about that evolution.
See, I'm with you there, Juan, that, I've said in the earlier episodes, especially about the mysticism, right, those mystic schools, Freemasonry was influenced by all of those things. Whether it would be Jewish, whether it be Egyptian, whether it be Hindu, all of those ancient schools have come together to influence Masonry, and there's traces of that still today, and we can talk about that at a different conversation. So you can claim that it was influenced by, but maybe not started as. Make sense?
Well, that comes right out of the Enlightenment age, in which Freemasonry really rose to prominence, because the Enlightenment was a time of cultural rediscovery of those ancient mysteries like Gnosis and Hermeticism. So it's only natural that Freemasonry, while still, growing up and getting its roots in a predominantly Christian, or at least token Christian culture, would be influenced and have little pieces of these other ancient mysteries here and there.
So let's fast forward to now, right? We seem to be much more tolerant now. We seem to have loosened that language in many jurisdictions to say belief in a supreme being, whatever that is, and often it stops, the interrogation of what that is stops at the petition form. What other religious influences have you seen today? For example, what other religions, non-Christian, have you had go through your lodge? Robert?
Well, in my lodge, none. My particular lodge, outside of the occasional person of my persuasion, none. Everybody has been a church-going Christian.
Wow, that's fascinating. Jason and I live in the melting pot that is Northern Virginia, and so in my mother lodge, I mean, we've had Hindus, Jews, Christians, Muslims, the whole variety, and that's cool because of other reasons we talked about earlier.
The northern area of Illinois is very culturally diverse, and to be sure, I should mention that Waukegan Lodge 78 is not the entire of our district. We have a ton of diversity, and I've been to many a degree work, I guess you'd say, in all over Illinois, where I have seen non-Christians, but my particular lodge has been 99.9% Christian.
Juan, Nick, have you guys had any other
Yes.
religions?
Oh, most definitely. In my lodges down here, we've had the two predominant religions are Christianity and Judaism. Those are the main two. We have had a minority of Muslim that come through, and I was at the various initiations and passing and racing of a Muslim brother, and he did so in the presence of the Bible, not his particular volume of sacred law. I've even received questions locally about Odin.
Wow.
Yeah. So I can't say that one went through completely because I wasn't there. I don't know who the person is. Somebody asked on behalf of this man, so I don't know where that ended up.
Well, and
Interesting.
I think there was a huge topic on the Beehive a while back, which is still active. I get a notification every time somebody makes a comment on that thread. It's an interesting one. People who had the Norse religions were declared to be not okay to join, I guess.
Yeah, that happened here.
Yeah, I know.
So since I've kind of covered the Northern Virginia aspect, I'll ask Jason this question: what about polytheism versus monotheism? A lot of the things we've been talking about up till now have been monotheistic, a single god.
Mm-hmm.
What about the concept of polytheism in a pagan aspect or something like that? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, interestingly enough, this was a topic of debate at the Grand Lodge level, not in Virginia, but in another jurisdiction, maybe a year or two back.
I do remember that.
There was a communication that went out that said, members of polytheistic pagan religions. I know they're not necessarily the same thing, but they kind of they lumped those two together. Cannot be Masons, and then I believe it was either up for a vote in the Grand Lodge, or they just ended up like detracting it altogether and just saying no, never mind, we redact that.
That was Florida, by the way.
Oh, it was Florida.
Yes. Oh, sorry, Juan.
Here, I step in front of this bus.
Juan still joined regardless.
So, but when it comes to polytheism, a very close friend and brother of mine, who was one of my mentors, was a self-professed Wiccan, and he's a brother. And even if you're of a polytheistic faith, I still think that in the aggregate, you believe in some sort of creation story, even if that is something akin to spontaneous Big Bang. I think that as long as you believe in a force bigger than yourself, that's really the meat of who we are as a brotherhood.
When we ask somebody and they say, well, why do I have to believe in God or a supreme being? The answer we always give them is, because I can't just say, do you promise on your TV? I can just take your TV. If you
That's a nice TV.
Yeah, sweet TV. You have to believe in something greater than yourself, because you have to have a grand view in, even as a deist, like myself, for instance. Do I believe in some sort of retribution if I'm not good? Yeah, I do, but for me it's not afterlife, it's right here in this life. Like, if I don't do right, I'm going to get it. So I think Jason hit it right on the head there. It's absolutely being able to swear to something, bigger than yourself.
And that's actually something that entered apprentices learn in their lecture. What? It's because no other obligation could be considered binding or
right.
as binding. So
I have a question for you guys. And because you're talking about this kind of polytheistic view, I was actually in lodge one evening, and somebody was not a Mason was asking about it, and we were talking about it, and a guy literally shot up out of his seat and he said, "One, you have to believe in one God." And I thought it was kind of a little over aggressive, but it was interesting. Do you guys have you guys had experiences like that?
Did you ask them which one?
Yeah, which one?
And set them in a fit.
So
it's kind of funny. In Minnesota, we don't really talk to each other. It's very weird. I try to explain the culture of Minnesota to a lot of people, but I'll explain it by way of an example. We had a really good friend of mine who's also a brother, and so he and I are chatting, and we're like, yeah, so I earned Eagle, and he's like, yeah, I earned Eagle, and I'm like, yeah, what troop were you in? He's like, and I go, I was in this troop, and he's like, oh yeah, I was in this troop. It was an LDS troop, and I'm like looking at him like, wait a second, you're a Mormon dude? He's like, yeah. I'm like, man, I never even thought to ask that, So it's just kind of funny how for pretty much 2 years of just being friends and hanging out and stuff, it's like, man, I didn't even know that. And so, for at least as my experience has been in Minnesota, is that nobody, we're really uncomfortable with that question.
Maybe.
So it's one of those, you just circle do you have a sincere trust and faith in God? Yes. Okay. I'm not asking anything else. I don't want to know. I don't want to know. And it's just kind of funny. You know, it took years for my
So-
lodge to finally put a Tanakh and a Quran on the altar. Not because of any. It was just we didn't really want to think about it, and finally I think we said, hey, you know what? Let's show off that we have brothers of these faiths in our lodge, and so we
actually, I
finally
had
did it.
I had kind of the opposite scenario happen to me, where my first time visiting a Prince Hall Lodge in Virginia, when they were praying, they prayed in Jesus' name. They prayed in Jesus Christ at the end. And I was caught off guard because, again, our prayers are meant to be tolerant of all religions and are very broad, and they specifically had it in their ritual, Jesus Christ, Amen. So, little caught off guard at first. I mean, definitely that is my religion, but caught off guard to hear it in ritual that way.
That's how I felt in the York right
Yeah, we're not
ceremonies.
talking about the Christian side of Masonry and the dependent bodies and all the other ones, but the pure Blue Lodge, pure entry level Masonry.
Nick, you brought up an interesting point about different books on the altar. So here in Illinois, as far as I know, and as far as I have been told, even if, let's say, Juan comes into my lodge and he's not Christian, let's say he practices Judaism, sure, we put like maybe a Talmud or the correct holy book for you out, and it's open, but you still take your obligation on the open Bible. Yours is still just off to the side and open.
I've been witness to very passionate discussions about that from very well-learned brothers in my jurisdiction, and I was shocked at the positions taken.
Wow.
Yeah, and I am not at liberty to say anything else other than that.
So for Virginia, what we are allowed to do is the Holy Bible must be open at all times on the altar. So it must be there, but someone's personal VSL, volume of sacred law, can be there, and they can take their obligation on that. But at all times, the King James Bible must be open.
See, I find that absolutely absurd.
I mean, I've heard of other jurisdictions where they have a blank book, and it assumes all of the spiritual teachings of the plethora of VSLs that are contained there in the altar.
I find that beautiful for some reason. You know, I think that's, because what I think it's like a symbol of a symbol of a symbol.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I like it.
No, but you know what? Even let's say, how many people can you initiate at once in your jurisdictions?
No more than 3.
No
Or
more
five,
than 3?
or 5 in a day.
Yeah.
Or 5 in a day.
Nick?
Okay.
10.
Holy smokes.
Around the altar at the same time.
Yeah, I've seen it. Yeah.
In DC,
Okay.
you can do like 50.
Yeah.
Well, imagine statistically, at least in the states and the jurisdictions that we are, even if we were not going to give predilection to the Bible in contrast to, let's say, the Quran, statistically you will have more Christians, I presume, around the altar. If you had 10 people, you'll have more of one than in the other. And regardless of whether you let the Muslims take their obligations upon the Quran and the Christians take their obligation upon the Bible, it will look as if predilection is given to one book over the other. Would you agree?
That's a fair statement.
So, like here in Illinois, like if we do any kind of massive degree work, each candidate has to have a member of the lodge, and they still have to take their obligation on a Bible or whatever their volume of sacred law is, and it's held in front of them. So they have to have, like, each one of them has to have their own. But again, the Holy Bible still has to be on the altar. And so 2 years ago at the Illinois Grand Lodge, this was a big deal. Somebody brought to the floor, and they brought it to a vote, that we replace the word in ritual, Holy Bible, with volume of sacred law.
Cool.
Due to the Nick, correct me if I'm wrong, is it like the Regis poem or Anderson's Constitutions, which refers to the oldest as the volume of sacred law?
It's something like that. I'd have to look it up. It's an
One
English.
of them refers to the volume of sacred law and not the Holy Bible. So they just wanted to make it ancient, and they wanted to open it up so that it could be whatever. My take was to just let the master dictate whatever the book was and replace the wordage. Like, done. But it failed miserably.
It's funny you say that. I specifically asked about that in Virginia. Despite the candidate having his own VSL, the words in the ritual are the Holy Bible. So it's very
Quran or something. You still have to see the Holy Bible. I think it's just absurd, absolutely ridiculous, a failure. I think. But that's my position.
Well, discussing, I wrote a blog post a while ago. I actually wrote 2 blog posts, one about the volume of sacred law. There was a paper that was written by a guy from, I think, Singapore, I believe, and he kind of explained all the different things that you have to contemplate and think about before you're going to use a volume of sacred law. So, like, with the Quran, are you going to have another Muslim brother hold it? Is it going to be wrapped up? How are you going to feel about that? Is it okay if a translation is used because then you don't have to take the same steps? How about if you're using the Vedas? I mean, are you going to have to do something special with those? Do you take the obligation on, above? And so there's a lot of interesting, for us in the United States, we don't really think about it. It's just like, it's a book, you put your hands on it, and you're done, right? But, these holy books are treated very differently in many different cultures. So, there's sometimes, and this is coming into the next blog post I wrote, is sometimes in our desire to show how tolerant we are and how totally with it we are, we sometimes don't get what we're doing. And the reason I say that is I had posited on another blog post that that we should just establish the King James Version of the Bible, which, to be honest, as somebody who's I don't use the King James Version. I think it's a silly translation. Well, not silly, just not very accurate, right? And so it's not worth it to me. But it's still kind of a symbol. And so if we just focus on it as a symbol, a representation, instead of something else, and just have everybody use the same, just don't even think about it. Just throw your hands on that and be done with it. Instead of, trying to show how tolerant we are, and then all of a sudden, because, we weren't thinking about it, we were in the prep room, we weren't really thinking about it, we just kind of asked him, hey, do you need this? And all of a sudden you offend a candidate, which is very possible.
Yep.
That you will offend a candidate because in our desire to show that care for our brothers, we do something completely foolish.
And this is why we don't talk about religion in lodge.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
it's such a sensitive topic. But we can talk about it online.
Open the door with assigning different VSLs, and so it was one of those. I was noodling that particular question because at some respects, like when and I'm going to get slightly political, but not really. Keith Ellison, who's a representative in Minnesota, took his oath of office on a copy of the Quran that was owned by Thomas Jefferson. And if you remember, there was this huge to-do about how could he do such a thing. Everybody else always takes their oaths on whatever, right? And it was a huge to-do. I mean, it was on national talking head shows for at least 2 weeks, right? And, I was sitting there thinking about it is that, if we're going to use different VSLs, the biggest thing that we have to do is, one, talk to the candidate before we even get to the door. I mean, this should be happening at least a couple weeks before. And, hopefully, and do not push the issue. Don't say, you know what, you're a Jewish guy, right? Do you want this to not? Do you? And I think we just have to show a certain level of care along with, being open to all of our brothers.
Yeah.
All
I
right.
think-
Well, let's take some time now and hop over to social media and see
All
what
right.
is going on out there.
And
could go
we
all night.
have a ton of awesome stuff tonight.
Wait, someone's talking about
And I
religion on
really
the
need-
internet?
No way.
Yes. Holy cow. And I do need to lead with Brother David Oliver Kling, excuse me. Sorry, David. He said something that really, I think, resonated with me, and I am scrolling through like 20 of his comments. He said, Masonry is orthopraxic, not orthodoxic. And the difference is key. Orthopraxy is the idea of right conduct, and orthodoxy is right belief. So, in that and of itself, he says there are orthopraxic religions and there are orthodoxic religions, and then there are those that are a bit of both. But that was some really, really interesting commentary that I found pretty insightful.
Very nice.
Let's see. Sorry. Eric Tamez has said actually, his lodge allowed him to have his own volume of sacred law. They put a copy of the Torah on the altar, and he took his obligations on that. And they've had many different volumes of sacred laws in his lodge, to include the Quran and the Book of Mormon.
Very good. Yeah.
So we got a couple comments about our comments on belief in God and oaths, and Donnie Dillon mentions that oaths not taken in some sort of religious context being invalid is actually a personal pet peeve. A good man's oath is good because he's a good man, period. So what do you guys think about specifically the spirituality of the oath and swearing to God via, say, a man swearing specifically because he is a good man?
It brings to mind a candidate who took his obligation on a mirror, because in his the viewpoint of the individual was that we are the reflection of God, and so if he took his oath this way, it was most appropriate, and he felt that when he was saying, your allegiance to God or whatever within your obligation. I don't know how to phrase that without breaking obligations.
Was the religion narcissism?
It was more along the lines of the man type argument, and I thought it was a very interesting take. But anyway.
But it sure made everybody think. Anybody who had anything to do with that, I'm sure it made them think.
Yeah.
I'm sure it was something. Well, we're still talking about it now.
I think specifically they probably thought only for a second, because only the most open and accepting lodge who already had thought of those kind of things would let that happen.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that would not fly anywhere in this state. Which, whatever.
There's another good comment from Joseph Vanderstelt, where he had considered taking his Master Mason obligation on the Corpus Hermeticum.
Yes.
But decided not to, as he didn't want to ruffle any of the old folk in the lodge, and he regrets not doing it, as it would have had more meaning for him.
Now, see, that to me is like a huge tragedy, and to me I feel like, how dare we give off an air that would make somebody think that. Like how it kind of makes me sick.
Well said.
Well, if you're not true to yourself, especially through the process of going to degrees, then why are you joining an organization to begin with?
Yeah, know thyself.
Right.
Yes.
WCY branding.
Boom. So we had a good comment from James Gutzman, who said he was always taught the understanding of Masonry as a religion was explained in the context of other religions. Masonry encourages its members to always put God, work, and family before your duties to Masonry. This, in and of itself, implies that Masonry gives precedence to an individual's belief outside of Masonry and doesn't try to impose its own beliefs as a religion. So the sheer fact that Masonry says you need to put your own faith in God and your duty to your family above anything in Masonry is in and of itself kind of an argument against Freemasonry being an actual religion.
Yeah, I can see that.
That's a good one to wrap up with. I think we've run out of time for now. There's many more comments, and keep the conversations going. But let's start wrapping things up with final thoughts and shameless plugs, and I'll start with Nick Johnson.
All right. You know, I feel like Robert wants to say something to me. I can totally tell. He's ready to go.
Sensing the tension.
He told me that he was getting some plane tickets to come to Minneapolis, but you know, I don't know if that's true or not. But
You're Nick. That's it.
yeah. Well, you know, but the thing is, for me, I think our focus on religion. I mean, it really is. If the whole point of Masonry, at least in my opinion, is to bring all men into a brotherhood, regardless of their dogma, then we have to at least figure out a way to, one, balance the needs of the group, obviously, which is, you know, pretty easy to set out in terms of, you know, you have to believe in a supreme being, however that is. And, you know, I've gotten lucky in that, you know, we just, once that question is answered in the affirmative, we just kind of move on from there. You know, and so I know Masons who are OTO. I know Wiccan Masons. I'm friends with Gnostic Masons. You know, but at the same time, those labels just, I don't know, they just don't matter to me as much as just calling them a Mason. And I think that's just it. And so, you know, for me, I've gotten so many great friendships from this fraternity. You know, and you know, I'm not the kind of person that, you know, I just, oh, I'm not going to hang out with that guy. He's blank religion. I mean, I don't live in the 1950s or whatever it is. So, but, you know, I think it's one of those that you just, those circles, even now in our modern era, don't join together anymore in those kind of, even in that Venn diagram. You know, we just, our circles don't meet as often as in the lodge. And so I meet a lot of guys that I'm lucky to call friend, I'm lucky to call brother, regardless of their religion. It's just a wonderful experience. And so, you know, it's a touchy thing. We have to balance things out. We have to make sure that we're not excluding people, and we're, you know, focusing on self-improvement, however that goes. So, with that, I have a blog, millennialfreemason.com, 2 L's, 2 N's. Awesome sauce.
Thank you, Nick. Robert Johnson.
Hey guys, let me just first start by saying, hey Siri, remind me to watch the Masonic Roundtable on Tuesdays.
At 7.
All of you with iPhones will thank Robert later.
Yeah, I hope that worked if you're listening to it in your car.
Anyway, let us know.
Let us know it worked. Robert Johnson, you jerk. Anyway, you know, Nick, all joking aside, I think everything Nick said really hit it on the head. I think that for me, Masonry and religion, I think they go together in the sense that the question of deity is essentially just a gatekeeper in my mind. Everything else within the context and the stories and all these things that go into Masonry, those for me are quite interchangeable with any story or parable that is comparable. So that's just my point of view on things. But I have definitely learned a lot in these last 50 minutes from, of course, the brothers here, Juan and Jason, John, and Nick. So in any case, if you guys like Masonic podcasts, mine comes out on Sunday nights, 9:30. Thanks very much for listening to the show.
All right, thank you, Robert. Juan Sepulveda.
I hated this episode. I'm kidding. I'm repeating myself. I really enjoy listening to, everybody's perspective on this topic. I think I have a very specific view about the place religion has in a lodge. Within a tiled lodge, it should have no. The discussion of religion should have no room within a tiled lodge. However, having conversations of religious matter with brothers is highly encouraged. I doubt that a man who joins Masonry when he's 18, if your jurisdiction permits, or when he's 21, that he's all set in the know thyself department. I, for one, am one that with every day that goes by, I continue to search for more light, not just in Masonry, but in my own religious beliefs. I try to seek to understand this unintelligible force or energy we refer to as God. This is something that is a daily task for me to understand, what's God, what is God's intention in my life. So, I encourage brothers, as part of your own personal development, don't bring religion into the lodge, but have an open, tolerant discussion with your brothers about religion if you can. I think there's a lot to learn about it there. If you can't have a tolerant discussion about it, don't even bother. Work on the other virtues like prudence and the rest. Religion, it's a very difficult topic to discuss, but it's one that when done under the right circumstances and with the right people can yield incredible results. So keep on searching for more light.
Awesome.
One very quick thing, I encourage you to go to thewindingstairs.com where you can find episodes of my Masonic podcast. I publish them regularly whenever I have an opportunity or irregularly. And very important hashtag, go to lodge. More about that later.
Hashtag go to lodge.
You heard it here first. Juan said he's irregular.
Oh yeah, irregular.
All right,
Everybody
hashtag.
can send him Pepto-Bismol.
All right, Jason, what have you got?
Oh, so gonna try to choose my words carefully, and I'm channeling my grad school days from quite a few years ago. There's a social theory, and the name of it is escaping me right now, talking about group identity and why people join groups and why people tend to congregate into groups, and people are attracted to similarities in groups where they can rally around a cause, whether it's ethnicity or belief or like in the operative stonemasons, a profession. And I think Masonry's identity revolves around that concept of a brotherhood of man under the fatherhood of God, and that fatherhood of God is the glue that really binds men together as Freemasons. So while I personally don't believe that Masonry is in of itself, or is and was meant to be a religion in someone's life. I do think the spiritual aspect of coming together as men who can say at the lowest common denominator, we are the same. We are created beings on this earth under the fatherhood of God at the lowest common denominator. I think that's what makes this fraternity amazing, and I think that is part of the reason why we are such an incredible group of men who strive to make each other better. And I don't know if if there were too many logical leaps in there, but I think religion in and of itself, if you want to make Masonry your religion, I think you can. And I personally don't have a problem with that if you want to. I personally keep my religion separate from my fraternal organizations. I can appreciate the spirituality therein and the lessons taught in the ritual, and I can appreciate the incredible conversations that I have with brethren on religion and spirituality. But I like to keep my own personal Christianity separate from my Masonry. And that's just how I compartmentalize things in my own head.
All right, thank you, Jason. All right, so bringing it home, I'm kind of the opposite. I do believe that after joining Masonry, it has really helped me examine my faith in a good way and build upon it in a supplemental way, and ask some critical questions of what I believe, what does it mean, some of the allegories in the Bible. So that's certainly how I've blended the two. Again, Masonry is not my religion, but it has certainly helped shape my philosophical and religious viewpoints going forward. Another thing that I wanted to mention is that according to a recent study, millennials are the least religious generation yet. And sorry for the Huffington Post article. Here's the surprising reason why. This has been in the news as of May 27, 2015. And basically they're just doing the study and showing that just millennials in general are less religious and less spiritual. So it's not even the religion versus spiritual debate. This has been something that's been impacting things that our pastor brought it up.
Tyson, thanks.
It's all your fault. But this is an interesting data point, right? Because this is the next generation of Masonry, and if they are less religious and less spiritual,
Grand Orient of France.
do we need to have such a hard barrier of entry? We'll leave that for the viewer to decide. My last comment is, okay, Google, remind me to watch the Masonic Roundtable on Tuesday nights. And for that, thanks for watching and keep searching for more light. Have a good night.